Fire and Emergency Services Instructor, 8th Edition, Chapter 3, Instructional Planning.
Chapter number 3, Instructional Planning. Objective number 1, describe the benefits of instructor organization. This can be a killer because if you don't have good organizational skills to try to make sure your class is running correctly and run things outside of the classroom correctly, you can get kind of bogged down. So they increase instructor credibility, they improve the efficiency of the classroom presentation, more effective use of time, talent, and materials, reduce stress on the instructor, and meeting legal requirements for record keeping. So if I came in here shirt untucked, walked in 5 minutes before class starts, take an extra 10 to 20 minutes to get my computer plugged in, ready to go, what do you think that would do to my credibility as an instructor? You would look like you're unprepared. Exactly, Jeff. You'd look like you're unprepared, and you would lose that with your class. They have a trust in you to distribute the information accordingly. But if you're not prepared, what excuse do they have for not being prepared? Because you're not prepared as an instructor, and that's the thing. Improved efficiency of classroom presentation. I know exactly what we're doing tonight because it's in the syllabus, it's on Resource 1, we're ready to go. More effective use of time, talent, and materials, all three of which are very, can be scant sometimes, especially time and talent, and also materials to a degree, but especially since a lot of our departments run with very small training budgets, you kind of have to maximize everything you've got going on. Reduce stress on the instructor. I know, for example, that I've gone through all these slides, I've looked at all the information, I've gone through all the learning objectives and activities. I know exactly what's happening when it was supposed to happen. And then meeting legal requirements for record keeping. You have to maintain all of your course documents for a certain period of time, and it states that in 655 somewhere. But at any point in time, the state can come back and re-audit you and say, hey, you need to turn back and get this taken care of, and we need to see your records. That's especially true with Instructor 1 and Instructor 2, 3 courses. I've seen it done with driver, operator, pumper. The state does very much get actively involved in quality assurance. Instructors must be prepared to teach new topics. They have to read the learning objectives. They have to review the lesson plan. They have to check what equipment is needed, and they have to locate the required equipment, all before you come into the classroom. So I have to know what the assignments are going to be and how they meet the learning objectives. I have to know the lesson plan so I can teach to it. As far as equipment checking and locating, that's a logistics function. That's something that you do before class just to make sure you have everything you need. You also determine what skills must be taught. You review the required audio visuals and you check documentation requirements. For example, in this class, we're going to teach you how to break down things for classroom instruction. We're going to teach you how to file for a class with the State Board of Firefighting and Personnel Standards. As far as audio visuals go, there's a list of audio visuals the state recommends for this course that some people do use and some people don't use. I prefer to use them because they do very good at presenting some points of view of the course and the course requirements. And then documentation requirements, of course, as you move through the practical skills evolutions and the written test, all that has to be documented and sent to the state. Logistics is the gathering and preparation of the materials. You need to know exactly what you need, whether you need a projector or handouts or a digital presentation, laptop, pens, or an easel pad, or even a whiteboard, anything like that. And you have to be prepared to deliver your course, even if one of those devices fails. So for example, let us say for the sake of argument that my digital presentation wasn't working at this point in time, we would of course go back in and then start reviewing by the book. If I have a laptop issue, I've got a backup laptop I can use. I've got pens, we've got easel pads in the office just in case. But you need to make sure that you've got all your materials gathered and prepared properly before you even walk into the classroom. You have to know the assembly of equipment and material steps. You have to check for missing items. You have to review the operations of the class. You have to look at your room layout. You have to find replacements or make repairs and then revert to a contingency plan if you have issues. So there's always at least one good, you should always have a backup idea just in case you have a technology issue or a class issue or something like that. You always have to be prepared to move forward and deliver something for that particular course, because there's nothing more embarrassing than walking into a classroom and having everything fail on you at the same time. So we as firefighters like to be prepared. We like to keep our gear a certain way. Let's apply that not just to turn out gear or equipment on the engine, but also in the classroom and making sure that you're doing what you need to do instructor-wise. What are the keys to a successful teaching experience for instructors? I'll open this up to the group. Be prepared. Know your material. Same as being prepared. Kind of different though. Chief Allison? That's a big one here, having the heat turned on. Sometimes people turn the heat all the way down, or they turn the air conditioner all the way up. So, what's that? Right, exactly. Exactly. It's an interesting experience. Objective 2. Explain the factors considered when selecting training aids for an assigned instructional session. So Instructor 1 candidates will usually be told in the lesson plan what training aids are required. The Instructor 2, 3 in general actually sets up the lesson plan, writes the lessons, though they do all the outlines, they get everything put together. So on the Instructor 1 scope of practice, you will usually be instructed in a lesson plan what you're going to be using for that particular day. You have to know the factors to consider when selecting your training aids. You have to look at your objectives and your content and make sure those are aligned with the training aids you're going to use. You have to look at the required student performance for those training aids. For example, in this course, we're using Moodle through Resource 1. We're using it as how we're measuring your performance. So you come into the class, you do what you need to do, you go home, you do your homework, you look at the videos that need to be looked at, you move from there. But you have to have that clearly defined when you have a training aid or when you're even implementing those training aids in the classroom. The class size and interaction. If you guys will remember the other day, we had a lot of guys in Group B and not a lot of guys in Group A, or possibly that backwards. So instead of shuttling the first group that was over with Chris back up to my computer to take a look at what they were supposed to look at, we left them there because there were 7 to 8 students there in the back wanting to see what was going on with the activity. You have to look at your pace of learning. Some classes can go fast, some classes can go slow, and it all depends upon the pace of learning and how that's set up. And you measure that in classroom discussions by making sure of who is involved in the class and whether they're giving you indicators as to whether they're listening or not. You have to have practice factors. You have to give time to the students to practice. You have evaluative factors, which figure into how you're going to evaluate the students. And then you always have budget limitations. We don't live on large budgets with massive training staff and things of that nature. So we have to kind of keep things frugal, if you will, and we can do that in a lot of different ways. So we'll just go back and talk about what we just talked about. What factors should instructors consider when selecting their training aids? Experience, cost, that's a big one. Webinar guys, if you want to chip in here too, that's fine. I can see you guys in the bottom corner of my screen, so go ahead and send messages or flag us down. What's that? There you go. Sweet. We move on. Analyze potential events which can impact class continuity. What do you guys think that means? What's class continuity? Everybody wants to be here, moving forward on the schedule, being on the same page, getting along. Let's talk about continuity for a few. Actually, that's going to come up in a slide or two here in a minute, so we'll kind of hold on to that. And then discuss the methods used to reduce the impact of class continuity by a change in instructors. So you have to take steps to reduce factors that would negatively affect class continuity. And these are both in play tonight, or these are both in play through most courses. You've got instructor changes and you have weather variations. So different instructors teach different ways. You may have an instructor come up here and just kind of read off the screen and teach through the slides, but not really give you any kind of information to link that outside the course. What's that? Experience is a big thing. There's also weather variations. We've had a little bit of snow in central Indiana today, so it was kind of interesting getting to work this morning and coming home this evening. But you have to keep that in mind, especially in the fire service, because you're going to have variations in the weather. You will have to train in the rain. You will have to train in the snow. You will have to train in conditions that are less than advantageous to you. But there are ways you can overcome that. There's a few examples in the book of that. I know that one of the case studies talked about how the weather rained out their first practical day. So instead of doing what they were supposed to do for the practical, the instructor had to move on to the next chapter and then come back to the outside work on the next pretty day out. So how do we prepare students for a change in instructors? Correct. Okay, tell a little about the instructor that's coming in to replace. Jeff, you got anything? Okay. Meet with the instructor themselves, keep them on the right track. Chief? Okay, communicate. That's a good one, Kevin. That's good. So, through this course, I anticipate doing most of the lectures unless I get some kind of weird viral thing that will knock out my ability to talk. But for the most part, I'll be doing most of the instructing, and then the other instructors that come in the department will do mostly practical skills and things like that with you. So that's one way that I try to keep continuity over this course, because I know that the information is going to be presented in a certain way, in a certain fashion. But if by all means I had to actually have a contingency plan, I would have no problem handing off to any of our instructors who would be capable to deliver the lesson. So we just talked about rain and weather. Why might we not practice the same skills in the course under severe conditions when we may have to on the job? Not conducive to learning, attention spans, cold, wet, hungry, so on and so forth. That's a bad day right there. Here, for those of you listening from home, it was Chief Allison with 101 temperature in a level A suit. So that's clearly not a good day right there. So, safety, department SOGs, SOPs, and SOGs. Great, good stuff, guys. You'll find that most fire departments have a written policy to cover when they can be out training and when they need to be inside quarters doing something like EMS work or stuff like that. And you'll actually see SOPs, SOGs written by some training divisions that cover that exact issue. Instructors should take steps to reduce factors that negatively affect continuity. Equipment and material variations, instructional resource variations, differences in learning styles, and differences in knowledge level. Let's break these down for a few moments. A story, though, if you will. Back when the swine flu pandemic was occurring, the federal government decided that they were going to assist local fire departments and local EMS agencies with equipment from what they called the Strategic National Stockpile. And there was one instance where at least 5 different types of respirators, N95 particulate respirators, were sent out to some agencies. And instead of having all the same stuff across that continuum. They had to actually stop and train each individual on each individual mask and fit test them on each individual mask at the same time. So if you're doing an evolution, say for example, you're working with a tanker and a jet siphon, you need to make sure that one's the one that's going to be available on your department. If you have some older piece of equipment and then a newer piece of equipment, and you try to teach skills on the newer piece of equipment and don't cover the older piece of equipment, that's really not good as well. Instructional resource variations, we have made it very clear that this course is delivered over webinar and delivered over YouTube. And if that were to stop one day, or if we were to have issues with those differences and variations, if we were to have issues with the equipment, that would be unfair to you guys because it would negatively affect the class continuity. It would negatively impact your expectation of what's going to happen in the classroom. You have differences in learning styles. We talked about learning styles the other day. You have to work through those, and you have to make sure that you're deploying the right stuff to the right person at the right time. And then you also have differences in the knowledge level. So let's say we have 3 groups of firefighters on a department. You've got your newer guys that have just joined the department, maybe been on 1 to 2 years. You have your guys who have been on 4 to 6 years. You have everybody that's been on 10 years to 15 years. And then you have the folks that have been on the department since the department was constructed. And all those individuals are going to have different knowledge levels. They're going to have different understanding of the same situation. So you kind of have to temper that and make sure that you push through that and work to make your class stay continuous. When can class continuity be affected? Bad weather. A couple people in the class don't like each other. Okay. That works. Fellas? Budget limits. That's good. What's that, Chief? Bad instruction. Anybody else? Changing instructors if they haven't been changed. Describe the aspects needed to achieve course consistency. You have safety factors. You have types of training materials. You have resource materials, approaches to teaching, and skill performances. So let's talk about those one by one. What kind of safety factors do you think we're going to put in place for a mandatory firefighter class? 2 in, 2 out. PPE, proper PPE. Freelancing. Okay. You'll have different guys who believe different things are safe. And you have to make sure that at the end of the day, all your students are going to be safe. As far as your training materials, you want to make sure that they're consistent and they're accurate. So you want to make sure you have maybe a PowerPoint set up for the guys on your departments that like PowerPoints, or you need to make sure that you've got some hands-on evolutions planned for the guys that learn hands-on later in the course. You've got your resource materials that you can draw from. Resource 1, the textbooks. There's a lot of good stuff on firefighter close calls. There is a lot of fire service training material that is out there and available for everybody to take a look at. There's a lot of different websites that put all that information together. Facebook's a great resource as well to make sure that you're staying on the same learning level across the course. Approaches to teaching. We've talked about this in the past. You've got to make sure that your teaching approach can facilitate learning, whether the candidate or whether the student at their, basically you have to remain on their learning level and make sure that you can have that information distributed out. And then you have skill performances, which we do this, especially the differences between emergency medical responder and EMT. Emergency medical responders do a lot of stuff that an EMT basic does, but they don't do the mega code in the same way that the EMT does. They're going to drop an OP or an NPA. They're not going to put in a non-visualized airway. But you have to make sure that you're keeping everything on the same. You have to make sure you're teaching to the students. In what areas can course consistency be an issue? Get bored? All of it? Resources? Okay. Jeff, anything? Training materials. Yes, sir. Thank you, Kevin. Enough instructors to help also. Kevin? Skill performance. All right. In summary, effective instructors must be prepared to teach before entering the training ground or classroom. Preparation to teach is part of the planning instruction. Training aids must meet the needs of the learning objectives and the course goals. Instructors should plan ahead for the variations in the class to ensure class continuity and class consistency.